Hey, it's Ben, and today I'm with Marina, and we've been working for a number of years. You first saw me, I spoke somewhere out here in New Jersey, in the Princeton area, and
it was a yoga studio.
Yoga studio, okay. Didn't remember exactly, but in any case, I spoke, and then not too long afterwards, you gave me a call. Mm-hmm. And so I came out on the train and brought my table, and we commenced to work. And in the beginning, you were having a really tough time. Like you were experiencing a combination of debilitating fatigue, where, how would you describe that fatigue?
Yeah, it was very low emotional states, depression, and I was very unhappy. I feel like crying most of the time. I could not figure out what's happening and why am I losing so much interest just to leave. And I was looking for someone to work with me, and I understood that it should be a person that can combine both physical and emotional and mental treatment. And I couldn't find anybody in the conventional world who had the knowledge of both physical and emotional. And kind of deep in my heart, I've heard about the healers. I just never met once. And then I was looking around, and Ben showed up in one of these presentations about shamans, and I've never met shamans before, so I was really curious to come and see him. And when he spoke, I realized that a lot of things that he was talking about is relevant, and then I put away all the fears that exist in our culture about shamans, because I was a Christian at this time, and my friends were telling that there's no way you can ask for help from a shaman. But then we started to work together, and I remember the first time we had a session, I think something happened that night after the session. Maybe I think I had like this I sweat really a lot. It was like fatigue that was coming, and exhaustion coming with the sweating at night. And I knew from that moment that actually something was going on. It was not just the words, but something started to shift. And that was the beginning of our journey together. That is now about 10 years that we're doing this work together.
Mm-hmm. You also had were suffering from these horrendous migraines that would leave you incapacitated for days at a time.
Right. I also, the other reason besides the depression and fatigue, I had the migraine headache about twice a month sometimes, and it was literally the feeling that I can die any moment because I couldn't breathe and my whole body was shaking. And no medicine will help to go through this. And we don't know what kind of thing it was. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that was the other reason why we started to work together.
So now there's still some physical challenges at times, but overall you're much more resilient. You're much stronger and physically engaged than you ever used to be.
Overall, yeah. Though I went through menopause and aging process, and I am 50, almost 58 now, but everybody tells me that I look much younger than my age, and I'm physically in a good shape. Really, I can just enjoy life. And I can, go for long walks and run and swim and do all kinds of things. I don't feel any restrictions. And I still get headaches sometimes, but they're much lighter. And I forgot about these horrible things when I was, vomiting and they couldn't stop. And I was almost dead the next day after that.
That was the before, when you suffered the migraines.
Yeah, it took a long time. It took several years to arrive. It was not happening fast. It was not.
And it varies. The process is going to vary tremendously from one individual to the next. And a big factor here was, growing up in the former Soviet Union and in Saint Petersburg, and in that environment with some of the challenges within your own family.
Yeah.
And what your mother and grandmother had survived the siege in St. Petersburg, where the Germans were surrounding the city and like thousands of people had died. People were starving to death. And many were just killed outright. And so one of the things that I've noticed that's been very apparent in the work we've done is that there is this tremendous amount of trauma that has been held within Marina's body, and Marina, being very empathic, just absorbing, internalizing a lot of that trauma. And some aspects of what you described about your mother, that the kind of relational dynamic and being very sensitive, just that interaction being very wounding. And so just again, internalizing the trauma, and in addition there being a great deal of numbing or disconnect from the body and from the emotions. And then that resulted in eventually how that manifested in the physical body in terms of the migraines and the debilitating fatigue. Now, at the time that we started working together as well, you were married, and it wasn't the healthiest match.
It was not.
I could see that. It was pretty obvious.
But yeah, Ben could see it right away, and I couldn't see it. I knew that things not going well, but I had the tendency just to blame it on myself.
Yeah.
But then after a few sessions, we had this conversation, and Ben told me that actually what's going on energetically and emotionally is not healthy. And I started this process of separation from my ex-husband.
Yeah. You're getting stronger, and you're gradually becoming more and more independent, becoming more your own person. Yeah,
that was a process, and I'm very thankful for Ben that besides that sessions that we had these long conversations on the phone that helped me tremendously to go and to believe in myself, and just to go through this painful and slow process.
Now, I remember at one point I went upstairs to use the restroom, and your husband stopped me in the hallway and had this conversation with me as to when would I be done working with his wife. And I just, in so many words, I just told him, I'm not here for you. I'm here for Marina. And I just cut him off and just walked away. And my experience of interacting with him, I mean, I don't know if he's going to see this on YouTube at some point, but in many ways he's a very intelligent, and he is a nice person. Just sometimes the relational dynamics get very unhealthy, very dysfunctional, and for me, talking with him, there are some ways in which I felt like I was giving a quart of blood. And so there's a way in which he just kind of sucked the life force out of you. And I think that kind of fed into your physical condition at the time. The fatigue and exhaustion, all that. And it was also like a continuation of some of the early relational dynamics from your upbringing.
Yeah. I had very controlling mother, and mother who will not know the boundaries. And I think I continued to be in the same hurtful situation with my husband. So where I was not allowed to have any space or any freedom, and I was not heard. I couldn't complain or say anything. So that was the main theme to the marriage.
I'm like this romantic, and I really like to see relationships work and do everything I can to, like, I've worked with a number of individuals within couples that had some real challenges. There was wounding on the part of both individuals. And in working with the two, as the wounding would heal, the relationship would grow much closer together. But at other times, I work with people, and I can see that and feel that various aspects of the relationship are very toxic and unhealthy. I could see how it's damaging an individual. And I'm careful in these situations. Rarely do I ever tell someone, like, you need to get out of that relationship. Except for one friend years ago. I remember he'd be laying down asleep, and his wife would be shouting at him, or when you try to roll her and snuggle with her, she'd shout, "Get back over on your side of the bed." And I'd say, "Look, you need to get away from her. She's like really toxic for you." But for the most part, I work with people, and as they go through this evolution, this process of healing, what happens is there's just this inner knowing that when a relationship is really toxic, that inner knowing and conviction, they're just moved to make their way out of that relationship that is so harmful to them and are just that is not right for them, and to go out on their own and begin to make their way forward in the world on their own. And many times I work with people, and they meet and they pair up with somebody who's a much healthier, much better match for them. Now, I remember one incident a number of years ago that was especially difficult or challenging for you. And I've worked with so many people. I teach these classes on a weekly basis, healing the loss of love, attracting a healthy and loving relationship. And then I'm working with people individually that have gone through either a breakup or divorce. Maybe they're struggling with patterns of abandonment, unrequited love. And I could see they're suffering terribly. I mean, there's a woman who showed up in my class just a few nights ago that she found out the man that she was engaged to be married to, and here he's living a double life, and he had dating profile, and he was seeing other women, and she's devastated by that. And I see in so many instances where these individuals are still holding a tremendous amount of hurt, wounding, and they're not processing those horrible experiences. They're not able to process the experience of loss and the grief, all the other subsequent emotional responses. And there's a contracting around those particular losses. And the person, as they contract, there's a shutting down. And the unfortunate thing when that happens is, like, the person they're not able to be as fully present anymore. Sometimes it's as though part of them dies with the relationship that either failed, there's this shutting down, or maybe the passing of a loved one. But so in this, I forget what day of the week it was, but I trained with this master from China, have been for quite a number of years now. That's the main thing that's kept me in the New York City area. And so one morning we were training, and my phone rings, and it's Marina, and you told me, you said, I have some horrible news. And
I have to survive through some kind of event that I wish never happened to anyone, and never happened to me. And I just received the message that my son was found dead one day, and he was living by himself, and he had some issues with depression and anxiety, and also he was not communicating with us for a few years. And then we knew a little bit about his life through the friends, but we didn't have direct access to him. And then the policeman came to my husband and told that my son was found dead, and we didn't know what it is about. Then we found out that it probably was a suicide, and that happened so unexpectedly and in such a devastating way that I didn't know if I would be able to survive the whole thing. And I remember that I had the ticket to fly back to Russia a few days after that, and I was caught completely unprepared. And I was flying, I decided not to cancel the flight, and I went there. And on the plane, I thought that I will never make it to Russia. I thought I will die. Just the whole thing came back to me. And it was another challenge in the middle of my work with Ben that I have to work through. And he stood by my side, where a lot of my relatives just turned away. They just basically turned away from me at this moment.
I remember getting that call. Like I said, I was training with this master from China, and I told him what had happened. And I just said, I have to go. And well, first I said to you, like your husband, or former husband then, he wasn't going to come down to go with you. Like, you had to come all the way in from Princeton.
I had to come to New York to sign up the papers, to recognize the body. I was not sure what is this whole thing will be about. And my husband didn't even agree to come with me together. So Ben just came, canceled all his other plans, and he came with me, and just we went together to this what's it called, the place where the morgue, where we have to sign up the papers and recognize the body. So that was the thing. And I remember that Ben cried this day because he could relate to this whole thing from his own experience as well.
Yeah, it was I just felt it was my responsibility too. I mean, I felt horrible for many reasons. One, for what Marina had already gone through. You know, we had done all this work in building her up. She was getting stronger, becoming more resilient, making a life on her own. And it's like, damn, you know, here's just the worst imaginable trauma of, I mean, it's one of the most painful things imaginable, losing your own child. And I just thought, after everything else that she's already gone through, it's like, damn, this had to happen too. You know, a son who just cuts off and refuses to communicate. And part of it, not to fault him, or but you know, we all have challenges or personality dynamics. I think there were some things about him where he just refused to communicate, and so there was just, for Marina, no real means to have a conversation, to communicate, and to find closure, and then the finality of suicide. And having interacted with people who've experienced the loss of a loved one in this way, having some sense of how devastating that was, and it's like, oh God, how are we going to deal with this? And so as we continued working together, what has really amazed me is especially after seeing the devastation in other people that I've known over the years, that I've met along the ways, people who have shown up in my classes, people that many people I've encountered that I could just feel it's as though a part of them had died on the inside. They had shut down, they had contracted around that devastating loss. But yes, and I had just a tremendous amount of concern. I was really worried for Marina's well-being, again, after all the suffering she had already endured, and here's this, just again, one of the worst losses imaginable. And yet, despite that, and this is the reason I wanted to share this on the video, is the fact that I'm encountering, working with so many people that have suffered devastating losses, and that could be going through the breakup or divorce, because going through a breakup, for instance, even you're thinking you just envision a life you have together with this person that you've gone through a breakup with or divorce. There's just a lot of horrible things that people go through, suffering the death of a loved one, and I want people to understand that, like, on one hand, to some extent, there will always be a wound. There will always be the missing of your son, for instance. There will always be how would you describe it?
What?
With your son, you still feel very much for him, and there's always.
I think it just comes and goes in different stages, I would say.
Yeah.
And right now, I'm at the stage that I really am learning more about different spiritual practices, and I understand that everything that happens here is very temporary thing in the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. So I think having a perspective in the bigger picture helps to deal with the things. Yeah.
I think what has amazed me, though, is your resilience, and that.
I want to say something about the resilience. You see, I'm coming from the part of the world that suffered a lot of turmoil.
Yeah.
The wars, the revolutions, the starvation, the collective traumas, totalitarian regimes, massive persecution,
being thrown in the gulag, prison camps.
Yeah, prison camps, a lot of things, and
horrible things.
And in some ways, it's very difficult to, be part of this whole thing. But on the other hand, there is, there is a bigger plan about the whole thing. And I believe in the universal consciousness or universal intelligence, that people actually who are going through this kind of events, they equipped. Inside them, there is a certain strength to survive and certain resilience. And I was not aware about this thing until I had to endure all these things myself. So as my mom and my grandmother and other relatives, as they were able to survive the unhuman conditions, and they came up as people who actually they win, they come up victoriously through the whole thing. That means that they still were able to bring up their children, they still have life, they was able to enjoy life even after all that happened, and they never was broken spiritually, though they have some trauma. So I think that I inherited this from them, this kind of resilience. When the whole world is collapsing in front of you, you keep your core intact, and you have the strength to face like death and devastation. And you know, somewhere there's a deep knowing that it will pass, or that you're stronger than that, or there is someone in you that doesn't want to give up life. So that's what I discovered, that I have very strong capacity to survive. In my spiritual strength is even more than the physical strength. I think I would easily, it's more easy, you can kill me physically, but you cannot make me give up spiritually. Or there is this trust, I think, and strength that we share, like a lot of people from my background.
And for me, spending time in northern Sri Lanka, for instance, and the devastation of the war, in which Sri Lanka has the second highest number of enforced disappearances, at least that's what I heard, or read on a number of sources, in the entire world. And just thousands of mostly young men and women of the ethnic Tamil minority were just taken and disappeared. And just basically the government was operating death squads or paramilitaries. And I've spent a great deal of time with, I have friends and other people that I've met, their family members who were disappeared, and I see the extent of the wounding in many of these individuals. I recently spoke at the main hospital for the Kilinochchi district in northern Sri Lanka, and for the head psychiatrist had me speak to the medical staff in his department, and even a lot of those individuals there, there was the recent bombings, recent at the time of this filming, just this past Easter, where some of the radicalized individuals of the Muslim population that had gone to Iraq and had trained with ISIS or ISIL, they came back and set off bombs in 3 of the major hotels and 3 churches on Easter Sunday. And so there's, again, this collective trauma to the island as a whole in this case, but especially the Tamil people in the north have just suffered horrendously. And the United Nations estimates that there was about 40 to 70,000 innocent civilians that were brutally killed in what was the Sri Lankan government designated as a no-fire zone. And I have friends who are, among the survivors, and it amazes me how strong and resilient a lot of these people are. And it depends on the individual, depends on their own personal experiences. So I remember a number of incidents or interactions with people in Sri Lanka, such as mothers of the disappeared, and their own children were abducted, disappeared, and now it's 10 years at the time of this recording, 10 years since the end of the war, and the government has not been accountable, and there's no knowledge about what happened to their children. And these parents, but especially the mothers, are very much devastated by the loss of their sons and daughters, and even more so because there's no closure. Just having absolutely no way of knowing what happened to their children. And I see in many ways how these I feel the pain, the wounding. I see the extent to which they're very contracted, and it's
holding their breath.
Yeah, it pains me because I look at them and when I see people suffer, it's difficult for me. I want to do whatever I can from my end to be of assistance, to help to alleviate that suffering. I have at times questioned the ecology of working with some of these individuals because the fact that I'm not there on a regular basis, that I cannot speak Tamil and they don't speak English, I cannot pick up the phone and call them and have that conversation with them to help them understand what's going on or to work with them consistently. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, the devastation that's taking place in Sri Lanka is in reference to what you were saying about resilience, because many people suffering from these traumas, whether individual or collective traumas, do not bounce back. I know there was a certain strength with your mother.
Yeah, there is a certain survival skills, but people do not live the life as they cannot really express themselves.
Yeah.
That's what I understand too. That to be able to go through the loss and then still be active in the world, functional
human beings,
and continue your own journey no matter what happened.
Yeah.
Be in touch with your own essence, develop and fulfill your life purpose. I think to do all of that, you need to do the special kind of work.
Yeah, like what I was saying here, some of these individuals in Sri Lanka, especially the mothers, and they've lost their children, and their family members are going on, like maybe some of the other children are not quite so quite as much affected, and they're going on and they're making their life in the world. They're gaining their education and going on in their careers. But then some of these mothers, it's like they're just shutting down. They're contracting around all that horrible pain around the loss of their child. And now from what you were telling me, some things about your mother, there are ways in which she was very wounded. Those wounds haven't healed. And then I think your grandmother just pretty much lost it. Just as time went on, and both of them, they were there at the time in Saint Petersburg with the Germans surrounding the city.
Yeah. In some ways, I feel that I'm the work that I'm doing together with Ben and partly on my own, but he was my first teacher in this area. It just that I'm working the pain not from my own life, but from several generations before me.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's why it requires a lot of healing to do.
And that's what I could feel in your body too, because it was like I was feeling so much of the combination of the wounding resulting from a lot of the traumas you dealt with growing up, the collective suffering of a lot of the people around and about you during that time, and in addition, the continuance of a lot of the
issues they keep coming on in the present life.
Yeah, especially like in marriage and in some of the subsequent relationships.
In the marriage, in the relationship with my son, and then my son's own kind of career or his way and his dysfunctional behaviors. So all of that was playing.
Yeah.
It's not the past. It was playing in the present lives. So
Right.
but to heal all of that, we had to go deep layer by layer.
Layer by layer, so over time.
Over time.
And I've experienced this myself as well. There's from the wounding, the traumas of my own past, as I continue to do meditative practices I've developed, even working with qigong practices, has got into it some. And then especially going through the vision quest, traditional Native American practice that involves going out to fast alone in the mountains for the 4 days and nights without food and water. And as I've gone through these vision quests repeatedly, then there's this progressive dismantling of the wounding, the traumas that have very much lived inside of me. And so then as we've been working, every session, there's been this progressive dismantling of these. I could feel, as I mentioned earlier, like a lot of this your own individual experiences that have been very wounded, the collective trauma, much of that being held in the body as we continue to work through that.
And usually for 3 days after the session, I will feel really bad physically.
Your body's going through a purging.
Yeah, so I'm prepared, and though I like to spend time with Ben after he's gone for 3 days, it's not a very pleasant experience.
Yeah.
So I try to take it easy and don't plan big stuff on these 3 days.
So that part's tough, but then after you move through that, the difference is
after
that
I moved through this year, and at certain periods I got tired because we've been doing this work and it's the same thing over and over and over, and sometimes it felt like it goes so slowly that it will not, like when I'm 100 years old, maybe I will get over the things. But actually what happens is now it's going faster. Now it's going faster, and my mind and my emotional body and whatever, my intelligence is keep opening up. So I'm learning a lot of things myself, even independently. I'm capable of doing this, and that helps me to move forward. So I kind of feel very positive overall.
Yeah.
At this moment of my life, I think that all that suffering that exists in the world, it can be used it can be processed and can be used as a tool for evolution.
Yeah, it's fuel for growth, fuel for transformation.
Yeah, fuel for transformation. And we actually do create, I believe that we create our own experiences. And the more we're able to connect with our true nature, which is joyous and peaceful, I believe, and dismantle all these layers of history, of wars and earth conflicts and oppression and everything, the more we can kind of go through these layers, peel them up, and be lighter in spirit and more joyous, that will help us to go in this evolutionary process and become who we're supposed to be.
Sounds good. We covered quite a lot, so I think we'll leave you with that for now.